In the summer of 1597, a physician named John Gerard published a volume that would become one of the most widely read books in the English language. He called it the Herbal, or Generale Historie of Plantes. Gerard had spent 30 years documenting every plant known to European medicine, chronicling every remedy passed down through 1,000 years of apothecary practice. On the page covering black walnut, he wrote one sentence that stopped his readers cold. "The juice or liquor pressed forth of the green husks doth kill worms." Not a theory. A clinical observation from a man who spent decades watching plants work. What Gerard did not know, because he could not have known, was that at the exact same moment his book was being set in type in London, physicians in the Jiangnan region of China were writing nearly identical observations about a plant called kingsu, sweet wormwood. He did not know that surgeons travelling with the Ming military were documenting its use against intestinal parasites, drawing on knowledge that had been sitting in Chinese pharmacopoeias since 168 BC. He did not know that 7,000 kilometers away, healers in what would become the Cherokee Nation were preparing a decoction from the green hulls of a tree they called walnut water to clear worms from children's intestines before planting season. He did not know that Ayurvedic practitioners in Kerala had been using a compound called Vidanga for the exact same purpose for 2,000 years, citing it in the Karaka Samhita, one of the oldest medical texts in human history. Within one generation of Gerard Ayer's death, European colonizers would encounter those Cherokee healers, observe the same remedy, assume they had discovered something new, and begin a process that would continue for 3 centuries. That slow, systematic replacement affected every one of these traditional remedies, as they were substituted by patented drugs. 5 civilizations, same problem, same botanical solution, separated by oceans and centuries. That is not coincidence. That is evidence. Welcome to the Apothecary Vault. Long before the United States existed as a concept, the eastern woodlands of North America were one of the most medicinally sophisticated environments on Earth. The Cherokee Pharmacopoeia, formerly documented by ethnobotanists in the late 19th century, described over 800 plant-based remedies. These were not folk superstitions. These were compounds that modern pharmaceutical chemistry has since confirmed were biologically active. Among them was the black walnut. Cherokee healers called the tree sulisi. They used the bark for skin infections, the leaves for fever, and the green hull, the thick outer casing that surrounds the nut before it ripens, for one precise purpose: clearing parasites from the gut. The preparation was exact. Hulls were harvested in late summer while still green and firm, before the outer skin blackened and oxidized. They were boiled into a strong decoction and administered to anyone showing signs of intestinal distress, the bloating, the fatigue, the wasting that long-term parasitic infection produces. They observed something else. If they crushed the fresh hulls and dropped them into a still pool or stream, fish would surface within minutes, alive but paralyzed and collectible by hand. Western chemistry would eventually isolate and name that compound juglone. Modern botanical research confirms it is a naphthoquinone produced by the tree that actively interferes with respiratory enzymes at the cellular level. The Cherokee healers had no name for it in English. They did not need one. They had 300 years of clinical observation. In 168 BC, a noblewoman named Xinjui was buried in a tomb at Mawangdui, in what is now Hunan Province, China. When archaeologists opened that tomb in 1972, they found 52 medical texts written on silk and bamboo strips, describing diseases and their treatments in clinical detail that stunned medical historians. The recommended treatment for severe worm infestation included wormwood, qingsu. That same year, Chinese scientist Tu Youyou was tasked with reviewing ancient medical texts during a malaria crisis in Vietnam. She found a reference to wormwood in a 4th century document by alchemist Gei Hong, isolated the active compound, artemisinin, and eventually received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2015 But here is what the Nobel Prize announcement did not say. The Mawangdui medical texts had documented wormwood's anti-parasitic properties 18 centuries before Ge Hong wrote about it. Chinese physicians were using it to clear intestinal parasites for 2 millennia before Western science acknowledged it existed. Across the Silk Road, in the 1st century AD, Pliny the Elder watched Roman soldiers return from Eastern campaigns plagued by intestinal worms, an invisible enemy that drained armies faster than battle. He documented remedies used across the empire, including walnut preparations that matched almost exactly what the Cherokee were using in North America. The Romans had absorbed that walnut knowledge from the Greeks before them, who had learned it from the Persians, who had traded both knowledge and plant material across the ancient world for centuries. Pliny called the black walnut the nut of Jupiter, the plant of kings. He documented its medicinal efficacy with absolute matter-of-fact authority. He did not need a clinical trial. His sample size was the Roman army. The Karaka Samhita is one of the oldest complete medical texts in human history, compiled in its current form around the 2nd century AD, but drawing on oral traditions centuries older, it remains the foundational document of Ayurvedic medicine, a system still practiced by over 300,000 licensed practitioners in India today. In its treatment of intestinal disease, the Karaka Samhita devotes significant attention to what it calls krimi roga, worm disease. The treatment protocol recommends a plant called Vidanga, Embelia ribes. Modern pharmacology has since confirmed that Vidanga contains active quinone compounds, including embelin, which works through mechanisms chemically similar to the juglone found in black walnut. A different plant, a different continent. The same molecular class of compound, the same clinical application. Ayurvedic texts also describe a 3-stage anti-parasitic protocol: bitter compounds that kill adult worms, warming compounds that kill larvae, and pungent compounds that destroy eggs. A protocol so chemically complete that it anticipates the modern pharmacological approach to parasite life cycles by 2,000 years. 5 traditions, 4 named so far. The 5th, European apothecary medicine, will close this story because it is the tradition that disappeared last, and its disappearance is the one we can date precisely. Modern pharmacology has spent the last 60 years catching up to what 5 civilizations documented without laboratories, without electron microscopes, without double-blind studies. Here is what the science actually says. We will be specific because this channel does not deal in vague claims. Laboratory studies confirm that juglone, the active compound in black walnut hulls, demonstrates anti-parasitic activity against roundworms, tapeworms, and protozoa including Giardia and Entamoeba. The mechanism is documented. Juglone inhibits the respiratory enzymes that parasites require for metabolic function. Animal studies, primarily in poultry and livestock, show that black walnut hull extracts measurably reduce parasite burdens and egg counts. Artemisinin, derived from sweet wormwood, is no longer a traditional remedy waiting for validation. It is a Nobel Prize-winning pharmaceutical on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, treating malaria in over 90 countries. The Ayurvedic compound embelin has demonstrated anthelmintic activity, direct action against intestinal worms, in multiple laboratory studies. Research published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology has documented its precise mechanism against several species of parasites. But here is what we will not hide from you, because that is how this channel operates. For black walnut specifically, there are no large, rigorous human clinical trials. The lab evidence is strong. The animal evidence is promising. The traditional evidence spans centuries across 5 independent medical traditions. But the gold standard of modern medicine, a double-blind, placebo-controlled human trial, does not exist for this plant. The reason is entirely economic, not medical. Clinical trials cost between $20 million and $50 million to complete. Pharmaceutical companies fund those trials to protect patents on synthetic drugs they exclusively own. You cannot patent a tree. No corporation will spend $50 million to prove that a green hull you can pick up off the forest floor works as well as a drug they sell for $20 per dose. Unproven does not mean disproven. It means unfunded. Consider what that distinction has produced. Aspirin came from willow bark. Morphine came from poppies. Quinine came from cinchona bark. Artemisinin itself, the Nobel Prize compound, came from sweet wormwood. Every single drug in that list started as a traditional plant remedy that someone with a research budget eventually decided to investigate. Black walnut has been waiting for that investigation for 2,000 years, not because the chemistry is weak, because the economics are wrong. Before 1920, every pharmacy in America stocked black walnut hull preparations. They sat on shelves alongside willow bark tinctures and valerian root extracts, operating as the standard of care, passed down through European apothecary tradition from the ancient world. What changed was not the plants. The chemistry had not changed. Juglone was still juglone. What changed was the regulatory framework. The 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, the 1938 Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, and the 1962 Kefauver-Harris Amendment systematically restructured what could legally be sold as medicine in America. Each act was written with legitimate concerns about safety and efficacy, and each act, whether intended or not, created a framework where only compounds that could justify a multi-million-dollar approval process could be sold with medical claims. The plants that had treated human families for 3 centuries could not justify that cost, not because they did not work, but because they could not be patented. By 1960, every major pharmaceutical company had shifted investment to synthetic compounds they could own exclusively. By 1970, the apothecary shelf had been stripped bare. The walnut hull tinctures were gone. The wormwood preparations were gone. The entire class of traditional anti-parasitic remedies was erased. They were replaced by prescription drugs, part of a pharmaceutical chain that now generates $26 billion per year in the global anti-parasitic market. The anthelmintic segment alone adds $3.6 billion. GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, and Johnson & Johnson dominate this space. These corporations fund the trials, own the patents, and set the research agenda. The Cherokee healer did not have a patent. The Chinese physician did not have a patent. The Roman soldier, the Ayurvedic practitioner, and the English apothecary did not have patents. They had knowledge, and knowledge, unlike a patent, cannot be owned. It can only be buried. The black walnut tree did not disappear. It is growing in forests from Maine to Georgia right now, dropping green hulls every summer. Wormwood grows in every temperate climate on Earth. Vidanga is cultivated across South Asia. The plants survived. The ancient texts survived. What changed is who profits from your not knowing. 5 civilizations arrived at the same answer. Modern industry arrived at a different question, not what heals people, but what can be patented, priced, and prescribed. That is not a conspiracy. That is an economic system functioning exactly as designed. The knowledge exists. The Cherokee, the Chinese, the Romans, the Ayurvedic physicians, and the English apothecaries were not superstitious. They were not primitive. They were just early. If you refuse to let this history be erased, subscribe to the Apothecary Vault. We reconstruct the ancient shelf every week, one remedy at a time. And if you know someone who has been told that traditional medicine is folklore, share this documentary with them. The knowledge is free, but only if it keeps moving.